what we have is we are kind of a small retail chain with physical stores, but we also offer home delivery services. And the stores, of course, they have their POS systems, or the point of sales, or the cash registers. And for the home deliveries that we've already implemented, you use the ERP system. The ERP system already integrated in our data warehouse. And now the next step is to go look at the POS system and extend the existing data warehouse. And to do that, we already did analyze the source system data. So I'm going to hand this over to Thomas now, who's going to show us the steps in a real life scenario.
After I logged into my tenant, I see the solution overview. It's like the starting page where I see all solutions and projects. Solutions are like a container for different projects. And this way, a simple structure can be created over all projects. And it is also possible to select permissions or set permissions on solution levels. Here on this page, we have 2 solutions with 3 projects. In the first solution, we have 1 project, and in the second solutions, we have 2 other projects. So I step into the first project. It's an existing one. As Daniel said, I have to extend it with the POS mechanism. What we see here, it's now connected to the Git repository of the company. So the only thing we store in our database is the URL of the Git repo. Everything else, it's stored inside the company's Git repository. So we have no idea about these data. And what we see here, it's like a Git. We have the remote branches. These are the branches on the server side. And we have the local ones, which are at the moment are empty because I don't created any local branch, which are stored in my browser. And on the top, we have the main branch. Mostly the main branch is deployed on the prod system, and we don't want to do changes directly on the prod system. So that's why I create a new feature. I give it a name. I say POS integration. Click on save. And now a feature branch is created, and I can do my changes on my branch and don't affect any prod environment. And as I said, it is like a normal Git page. So if you are familiar with Git, you see all the typical or common Git commands like fetch, pull, push, or start pull request, where you are able to integrate the branch into the main when you have tested it, or it would be good if you tested it before integrated into the main branch and afterwards deployed to the prod environment. So now I step into my feature branch and I see the existing project. First, I'm on the discovery page or source system page, where I see all the source systems. As Daniel said, we already have the ERP in place, and now I have to integrate the POS system. And Donny already sent me the POS system. So I go to add discovery, create a new source system, say that's called POS, description is also POS, and then I can upload a file. I can upload the data hub file or a file which is created with the biGENIUS discovery app, or I can write it by hand with the biGENIUS file format. We recommend to use Data Hub or biGENIUS Discovery, but we also have the possibility to add it by hand. Normally, probably everyone will use the others, but for this demo, I will show it with the biGENIUS file format. Because Daniel sent me the biGENIUS file format before, it's a YAML file, I upload it, and then I click on save. And what happens in the background is the file is uploaded to biGENIUS. biGENIUS creates a common file format because we have different, at the moment, 3 possibilities to upload different files. And we create a common file structure and send both back, so the original one and the newly created one, into the Git repo of the customer. So also here, these data are not saved on our side. And now I can select all the tables or model objects I would like to integrate into my application. So Daniel, in his use case, he said that I have to do something with sales. So that's why I added the sales transaction and added to our system. The next step, it's like the heart of the application, the modeling area. So if you have a look at the menu on the top, it's like a workflow. First, you create your feature with the branches, then you extend or create new source system, upload discoveries, then you go to the modeling area, and finally you generate the artifacts, and then you can deploy these artifacts to a system. So let's go to the modeling area. And here we see an existing view. We have the possibility to create different views. A view is like a workbench. I get objects I need as a data engineer and work with them. This way I can easily distinguish domain-specific things and don't lose the overview in larger projects. So that's why I create a new workbench, or as we call it, view. I say this is the sales information POS. I copy this and paste it to the description and click save. So now a new view is created, and as a data engineer and I'm new to this project, I need to get an overview first. So that's why I added a mart composite object, or a data mart in the data mart layer, or as we see it here, gold layer. I click on plus, and as we heard before, it has something to do with sales. So I select the fact sales data and like to add it to my workbench. This is not create a new object, it's just adding an existing one to my workbench. And now I can show the data lineage and get an overview how the data flows in this system, in this existing system. So I see here, we have the sale invoice header, we have sales data on the bottom, and I think I have to work with these data. So let's add it to my view. And I can click on a button and everything which is visible on the data lineage view is added to my workbench. It's not, as I said before, it's not creating new model object, it's just adding the existing ones. And finally, I also have to add, of course, the sales transaction. And this was the previously created model object from the POS discovery file. So I add it here. And now I think everything is set up that I can start modeling and really implementing the use case. So I get a quick overview first with showing the data lineage. Afterwards, I took everything what I need into my workbench, and now I can start working with it. What we saw, or what I did before, was adding existing model object and also the previously created sales transaction object. And as a next step, I'd like to create a stage model object based on this source model object. But before creating this stage model object, I was just wondering what the traceability actually needs to be in this project, for example, or even if there is a naming convention. Donny, can you help me with this standard in this project?
Yeah, sure. As we've already done this in the past in our old application, of course, we have some default columns, as we say, that you use to have a traceability. So for example, we log the load date or the time when you load the data. You can log the system where the data comes from. So these are already columns that are integrated where we need them. And of course, when you create your SQL structure or the data warehouse itself, it also follows a pattern of a naming standard. So you give your model object a name, and then the views, the tables, and everything that gets created afterwards, they follow a certain standard afterwards when you create those SQL objects. So yeah, of course, that's it.
Perfect. So then I can continue and I don't have to worry about it. So, and then if I get Gregor correct before, so all these layers here, bronze, silver, gold, they are also configurable via the configuration, right?
Sure. So not really the layers, or what we've done in the background is we have a configuration that configures these layers in a way we need this. So this is kind of a data vault approach with a data mart in the end. So the gold would be the data mart, and of course we can change them. And for in the future, this will also be changeable for customer situations. But at the moment, these are configured, and of course we can change them. But we've already thought of how we want to structure the data, and this is generally the approach that those systems have, that they follow a certain structure, and we just have modeled this in the background in the way it should work.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks. So as I said before, I'd like to create the stage object based on this source model object. For doing that, I can use a wizard or automation step where I say, please create me the stage object from this source. And it will create the stage object. And if we go into the newly created stage object, we see that it automatically creates a lot of things. And what we see here in the detail view, we have the selected model object on the right side. So it's the newly created stage object. And we said we would like to create it based on the left side on the source model object. And what we also see here are all the terms. So our source model object has a couple of terms in it. And all these terms are automatically created for our stage object. And in addition, it also mapped everything. So if I mouse over this icon, I see that everything is mapped with a specific term in the source model object.
Yeah, and what we also see on the top here is those two default columns that we provide you with. So they're already integrated in when you create the model object of the stage.
Thanks. So I go back to the overview, and as a next step, I would like to create a link satellite for the silver layer based on this stage object. So I click the automate as well, and I see here we have a couple of more wizards, and these wizards are it's based on the type. There are different wizards, and I see that there are a couple of wizards. Will there be more to come, Danny, in the future?
Yeah, sure. So at the moment, we just have those basic wizards that create one model object out of another model object, and they follow certain standards. So for example, if you have a hub, that's just a representation of some with the business keys in there. So that defines an object like a customer, that you can identify the customer. And then you have satellites that store the information of those objects. And what we do is, what we do in the background is that we just create one object out of the other and take the columns that we need. In the future, we'd also like to have a more of an approach where you have those wizards and you can click through things so that you can maybe create a data mart object out of a stage object and have the steps in between already there. So we are thinking about this and how to better guide the users in creating their entities that they have to do in the data warehousing. So this will be a much better approach if you're maybe not so familiar with a data vault approach or dimensional modeling, so that we guide you in what you have to do and how you do it.
Sounds great, but I think for my use case, it's fine to just create a link satellite from the stage. And so the link satellite is created. If I jump into this link satellite, I see the same as we saw before. We have on the right side the selected link satellite. On the left side, we said we would like to create it based on the stage object. And we have one, and we see also that all terms are mapped except the business keys. The business keys are not mapped. So the next thing I have to do is to do relationships. I'd like to create relationships between this link satellite and the already existing link, which I saw before in the data lineage. So I go to the relationship page, and here I can add relationships. And if I do it, I click on add relationship, I see the link, which I said before I have to create the relationships. So I select the sales data link, add it, and now some magic happened in the background. For all the business keys on the left side, foreign keys have been automatically created with the naming convention stored in the configuration. So when I hover it, I see directly to which business key is connected with which foreign key. I also see it inside the table. As a next step, I have to map these foreign keys that the data flow is correct afterwards. So I go back to the mapping view. I filter the right side that it's a little bit, I get a better overview. I say I'll only show the foreign keys, and now I can map these foreign keys. First is the sell to customer number. This should be mapped from the customer ID on the left side. So I click on the left side, click on the right side, and the mapping is done. Next, it's the sales invoice number, and the sales invoice number is a combination from transaction ID and line number ID. So in this case, I first select the transaction ID and map it to the sales invoice number. Next, I click the line number again, and as I said before, I have to combine here the mapping. And if I click on it, a model window appears and says, hey, you already have a mapping. What would you like to do? You can edit the existing expression or create a new and map it automatically. In our case, we would like to edit the expression. And the expression, it's like a string field where we see S1 dot, and S1 is the alias, what we see on the left side in the background. We see S1 is the alias of sales transaction. So I concatenate it with S1 dot, and now I see all the terms on the left side, and I say it's the transaction line number. I click save, and the mapping pointing now to two source terms. So we have here the two, which indicates we have multiple mappings. And now everything is mapped. The last thing, we have to extend the data mart or the mart composite. I go into the mart composite that I can extend it. Here we see that we already have a data flow with two model objects, and a data flow provides you with additional mechanism to add or exclude data in your data flow. And for my use case, I have to create an additional data flow set. So let's create one. Let's create a new data flow set. I say the name, it's set2. And as a set operator, I say union. That means set1 and set2 are combined with a union operator. And then I click save, and that set is created, and I can add a model object. Which model object? The one we used before, the link satellite on the bottom. I select the link satellite, and now we have it on the left side, and we can start with the mapping again. And now I filter to the foreign keys that we get a better overview because the orders are mapped through from the foreign keys. So here we have the sell to customer number. We also have here the sell to customer number. So we map these two. And now we have mapped everything from the right side. And I clear it here, and we see where the mapping goes. When I hover it, I also see here the corresponding mapping. And now I go back to the overview and have another look at the data lineage and check if I completely implement the use case from Daniel. So we see here now an additional branch, we see we have the sales transaction source model object, we have the stage object, we have the link satellite, everything goes to the Mart composite object. So I think I've done everything what was in the use case. So as a next step, I would like to generate these scripts. So I go to the generate artifacts page and click on generate, and then I can deploy them to a test environment and test it before, as I said, before merging it, or start with a pull request and merging to the main branch, which afterwards is deployed to the prod environment. So I click on generate, and Danny, can you please show us how we can deploy our scripts?
Well, so actually we're not going to show this because this is something that happens now outside of biGENIUS. And why does it happen outside of biGENIUS? So I know there's some solutions that also integrate this stuff, but in our view, this happens in your environment and we don't really want to know about it. This is a security issue for us. On the other hand, it's independence, because the setup of how you want to structure your data, yeah, it depends on your use case. So every customer situation is a bit different. And yeah, then there's also the fault tolerance, so the segregation of duties that I've kind of mentioned. So the deployment here, you see kind of a way of how to do things. So we have the generation of the artifacts. You store those artifacts in a Git repository, and then you can kind of start the CI/CD, so a continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline that does everything. Of course, you can do this also manually. We have, for example, some PowerShell scripts that we can provide you with that help you in that area. But the thing is, I think that you should do as much automation as possible, and that your processes should be repeatable. Then after you've deployed your solution on a test or in the environment, for example, or your development environment, you want to test, okay, is everything working? So what we also provide you with is the load control. So this loads your data from your sources into your data warehouse and then into your data marts. And we have an orchestration solution for that helps you or that takes care of that, so you don't have to do anything yourself. At the moment, this is still the kind of what we've used before, but we plan on enhancing this and providing you with, for example, an Airflow solution and others. And of course, if everything works, you have a scheduler that triggers those load controls or this orchestration, for example, daily, hourly, or whatever your needs are. So how does such a CI/CD pipeline look in real life? So what is really important for us is the security issue. So we don't really know about your systems and we don't want to know about them. So what we do is we create the scripts that you deploy afterwards with some variables that you have to replace. And for this, I've already mentioned the PowerShell script, but you can also do this in Azure DevOps pipelines, for example. So these are some variables that you have to replace with the values that you have for your development environment, for your integration environment, or your production environment. Then after you replace this, you have deployable SQL scripts that you can deploy to your server or servers, depending on how you're structured, and then start the load job and validate your test cases. And this is a process that you repeat for your different environments whenever you want to do this. And that's it. So as I said, these are some support functions that we have, and we provide you with some scripts or some templates on how to do this.